So the third step would be, so now the actors learn their lines. You know, you've got to learn your lines as soon as possible, because then you're free to play with them. If you don't know your lines, it's like the camera person who's not got batteries in their camera. You know, your talent is just meaningless without that. And learning the lines can take a long time, but it's absolutely key. Because also you get insights into what you're talking about just by the repetition of learning lines. Okay, so the actors learn their lines and they've got 3 psychological actions to play with. So then I'll ask the actor to do the speech. We'll hear how it's sounding, and you know, sometimes it's coming over really well, sometimes not so much, a bit broken up, but usually it's not bad. And then we'll pick complete opposite psychological actions. So if you began with sort of charm, we might begin with sort of begging, or begin with a threat, something strong. I'll often break the psychological actions into tough actions or light actions. You know, to make light of something is a great action. You know, oh, my car's just blown up. To be or not to be? That's the question. You know, we can just begin with these opposites. So we'll just try opposites. So again, part of that is getting the actor used to the fact that they've got choices. I always say to actors, you know, mark your script in pencil, because then you change your mind. And not being fixed to one way of doing things. You know, once it comes close to when the audition day is, yeah, we'll fix on something, just because you're going to be going in there, the nerves are going to be up, and you need to know exactly what you're doing. But even within that, you need to be able to then change and do the exact opposite, because most often a director at a casting will say to you, well, instead of trying it like this, can you try it like that? And they might not talk in terms of verbs, action verbs. They might talk, you know, people have lots of different ways of talking about acting. But I try to encourage the actor to become familiar with interpreting what the director means, or even what they themselves mean when they say, oh, it should be a bit more sad. Well, what do you mean by sad? I mean, you can't act the emotional state. So we choose an action which elicited or seemed to give the picture of this sad state that you're after, or the director is commanding. But yeah, the sad, happy, all those words, all those emotional state words are useless, but people will use them, so you need to know how to deal with them, put them back into something you can act. You know, learning these speeches and doing your stuff is like doing any job. You know, if you're serving coffee, but you know, there's a sort of common sense to each job. You know, if you're a cop, be cross when you stop someone for speeding. Well, the emotional state of the cop doesn't matter, but you can say order, or command, or threaten, or things like this, which you can then do. So see the emotional state, the feeling is coming after the action. So you've got the feelings, you've got the action, and the audience will often tune into, they'll often say what they think the actor was feeling. But those feelings are coming from the action they're playing. And also, they're often just describing their own feelings. And when an actor first reads a text, they often talk of it or try to perform it in terms of how the audience should feel, which is not anything to do with the actor's job. Okay, so we're at this third stage where we've now started to play with a few different actions, a few different ways of performing the speech. So we'll start to have 3 or 4 complete different ways of doing the speech, 3 or 4 sets of 3 actions, if you like. We might even notice that, well, actually there's a 4th moment in this speech, or a 5th. And we're building up that flexibility. Also, by doing this, in the way I try to approach things, there's not really any point where they're meant to be being a good actor or a talented actor. We're doing things that accurately make sense and give over the story in such a way that the audience are engaged. The technique is in order to produce all those perhaps esoteric things that we maybe dream of producing. Okay, so now another thing we'll start to look for, because often I'll find that the last couple of lines of the speech we often might not do. We might say, well, just leave it there, just let's finish a couple of lines before the speech ends, because we'll work out what the last two lines should be once we've got the rest of it going. And before we look at those last two lines, or last sentence, last phrase, I'll often look at what the high point is. Now, the high point in a movie, in a play, in a speech, is not the final moment. It's a bit before the final moment. In a James Bond film, the big explosion isn't the final scene. You have that, then you've got a final scene which maybe has a little twist or maybe has a joke or whatever. But so again, doing our speech, we're often looking for a high point that's coming before the end, which we will then round off. And I usually on a script mark the high point with an asterisk. But also it gives the actor something to aim for, because often the actor wants to put the high point straight away, first word, some big shout, or end of the first sentence. But knowing where the high point is, where the most powerfully played action might fall, if you like, the one that gives rise to the strongest emotional state, if you like. Knowing where that is gives the actor somewhere to point at. Declan Donnellan talks about the actor's target, knowing where you're going, a fixed point where you're aiming at in a speech or a physical set of actions. So we'll start to mark that in. And again, in pencil, something might seem obvious when we're reading the script, but then as soon as you start to do it, or after you've done it for a couple of weeks, you might think, actually, maybe this is the bit where it all happens. So, okay, so we'll now, in this part 3, we'll have this set of actions. We'll have become quite flexible, so we can do the speech many different ways. And then we'll have found the high point, and then we'll start to find what the ending is. Is the ending soft action or a hard action, etc. So by then the actor will be in good state. Also, I would have by then, in week 2 of classes, started the actor on their modern speech, and we'll go through a pretty similar process.